Good afternoon, Wendy.
Good afternoon, Mel.
So we're
Uh,
gonna dive. Oh, go on.
no, you go.
Should we have a fight about who's going first? Which is
Yeah.
quite appropriate because today in our new kind of on the fly on a wall fly on the wall with Mel and Wendy. Oh, isn't that appropriate? I didn't turn my phone off.
That's real life.
There we go. Yeah. Yeah, a fly on the wall with Mel and Wendy. We're talking about relationships
Hmm.
and today we're going to talk about and unpick why we fight and or why we don't fight in relationships and the process, and rather than what are we fighting about, we're actually looking at what's going on when we fight. Yeah.
Yeah, because I don't know about you. Well, I do, but it is that what I experience is that it will start an argument and then it's something maybe minor, but it will escalate, and then it just goes on and on and on, and then at the end of it, they don't even know what the argument was about.
You're
But it,
absolutely right. And I'm aware we come with different lenses. So, and we realized that we were talking a lot when we were preparing or thinking about these topics, that we focused a lot, didn't we, on the blowing up and people kind of getting dysregulated and going to anger. But actually, because we come with different lenses, we kind of hadn't focused so much on actually when we shut down too. So that, when we how we fight. Not everybody fights, do they? There's a lot of shutting down, sulking, kind of running off to our corners, and then we struggle to come back together again. I remember working with a couple who said to me, they fought a little more, but actually what they noticed was they didn't have these days of sulking. They could step into the vulnerability and pick what was going on quicker and come back together. So it's the lack of being able to come back together, I think, that is often a problematic. Do you think?
I think so. Sometimes I think it is. Well, we know it's our past experiences, so we will go back to that shutting down, or we don't know how to do it, or we do it one way and our partner does it another way. So I get a lot where one of them wants to solve it right this minute, and they'll be saying, "I need to get an answer. Let's get this sorted. I can't go to bed on an argument. I don't want you to go to work on an argument." There's that real panic to get it sorted, whereas the other person is they're pulling back because they're feeling trapped and they can't deal with it because they need longer to process it,
Yeah.
or they just don't fight in the same way. And
Yeah.
so they're kind of pulling back and they can't do it. The other person's chasing them around the room, metaphorically, and then they just have a stalemate because neither of them can cope with what's going on.
I think you're absolutely right. I noticed that push and pull. It's a good place to introduce attachment styles, isn't it? And attachments. And what I notice is sometimes we get, I mean, there are lots of different types, but there is one dance that I see a lot, and the one you've described. And actually, do I feel trapped? Is my curiosity, or actually, is this too painful? Yeah, is this too painful? I don't want to talk about it is often rooted in shame and pain, isn't it? I don't want to talk about this. Or I've gone into my scared brain and I don't know what to say. So I feel helpless. And then what we have is shut down or run. Yeah, the fight or flight switching on. And you're right, that attachment dance is I'm distressed by this disruption in the attachment. I panic. It feels like the end of the world. I need to fix it right now. Otherwise, maybe I feel like there's often a fear of abandonment here. And actually, I remember working with a couple, and actually, he was like, she just won't let up. Yeah. And actually, there was this light bulb moment for him where he was like, oh, I don't come back. Yeah. I was like, it's okay to go. And we kind of spoke to her about giving him space, but they never resolved anything because he wouldn't come back. It's kind of like it's over now.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's over now. We've had the row. We've sulked, or we've been apart for long enough. We come back. but actually we've not reconnected. So whatever is bubbling under the surface keep there's a saying that couples keep having the same fight. Yeah.
Yeah,
It's
yeah,
not different once it's the same one.
yeah.
Um, there's only three reasons we actually fight. They can go into three boxes, and I think it's really helpful to think about the three boxes. This is the work of Esther Perel. I'm going to say where I nicked the theory from because
Yeah,
we
absolutely.
pull from so many different types of theory. Um, um, so the three reasons couples fight: power and control, the need
Yeah.
for power and control. The second one, we're trying to a lack of intimacy or close connection. Kind of, come on, where are you? And the third one is often a lack of appreciation, validation, being taken for granted. So when we're talking with couples, we can literally give them the framework and they can kind of think, what's this about? Which sometimes it fits into more than one box.
Mm.
And so couples often get into power battles about the need to be right, don't they? My
Oh,
way is the right way, or your way is not the right way.
yeah. And that sense of if they're not validated, I am right. And if they're not, if that's not validated, that can feel really quite anxiety making. Because, well, I've always got it wrong. So therefore, where does that leave me?
Yeah,
And it, yeah, that anxiety. And out of that window of tolerance, then,
yeah.
like, whoa, and can't think, can't do anything. And
It
yeah.
can be really distressing for couples when they are disconnected and you don't hear me and I can't hear you. And what's wrong with you? The stories we make up are often coming from our own histories, aren't they? Of not being heard, not being listened, not feeling that we matter.
Mm.
Um, there's often some common things that we see when couples are fighting or not fighting. Can you think of any that spring to mind?
Oh, there is one definitely that comes to mind where um, she she wanted to get it resolved, so she needed to be heard because she wasn't heard when she was
Mm-hmm.
a child. So yes, listen to me, you're not hearing me. But his way was he would shut down completely, and the reason was it was an echo of his childhood.
Yeah,
He would get blamed for everything, whether it was his fault or not. He would be punished, whether it was his misdeeds or not. And therefore, if he tried to retaliate, he got punished even more. So
yeah.
he withdrew.
He
And
would
the
shut down in shame and
yes,
fear. Yeah,
but also it gave him control because what happened was his parents, then his caregivers, would actually approach him and come to him rather than him trying to resolve it. They would approach him. So that meant he was punishing them. You are being mean to me. You're punishing me for something I haven't done. The only way I know how that works for me, the strategy I've got, is punishing you. I'm not going to talk to you.
that's so interesting, and it's something that I recognise. And I always remember working with a couple and saying to them, sometimes the very thing we need to do is the opposite of what we are kind of wanting to do. So
Mm,
when her partner came with anger and was kicking off, it's kind of like, well, because you're abusive, you don't deserve any care.
yeah,
Yeah. And so I
yeah.
withdraw and I'm not going to come in and support you. You don't deserve it. So actually, often, sometimes couples meet anger with anger. They go up with their partner. They're not able to regulate. They're not able to notice
Mm,
that actually, when somebody is angry or shut down, they're not okay. They're not coping. They can't manage. And so actually, I always remember her coming back and saying, it was really hard because I just wanted to shout names back. But I
mm,
remembered what you said. This client had a trauma history. There was lots of abandonment in his history. And so actually what she was able to realize was, actually, I've got a small boy in front of me who's not okay, who's out of control. And he's basically having an adult tantrum because he can't regulate. Yeah.
yeah,
And he can't say, I'm not okay. I'm feeling vulnerable, or I'm feeling attacked, or I'm feeling out of control, all those vulnerable things that sometimes we don't have a language for. And I think particularly when you ask people how are they often tell you what they've been doing
Oh yeah,
rather
yeah.
than they. So some people can't name their emotions and how they're feeling. I like the feelings wheel, there's lots of them out there, but it actually really gives couples and individuals a list of emotions so they can start to look at, like, what am I feeling here? And actually maybe it's disappointment, maybe it's I
Yeah,
feel
yeah.
hurt. Yeah,
Yeah,
just
and I think along
yeah,
with that, when we can't voice and we can't reattach it, it's that feeling of shame. I
yeah,
can't speak up. I don't know what to say. I'm feeling vulnerable, and that vulnerability is very can feel quite scary. But
yeah.
it's so but I feel
It triggers
ashamed.
those.
I can't fight with you.
Yeah,
Maybe
triggers
I'll
those kind of fight, flight, survival responses, doesn't it? From that
yeah
lower cognitive brain. Sorry, not the cognitive, not your upstairs thinking brain, but your lower survival brain. You were literally hijacked by that. I think
yeah.
the more trauma you've had, the more difficulty is to control our responses. And we think, well, why can't and I think there's a lot of won't rather than can't that goes on in our relationship patterns. Like I get people say they won't talk to me. And
Yeah.
actually, I remember saying to somebody, is it won't or can't? And I remember them freezing as if to say,
Mm,
oh my God, I hadn't thought. I thought she was choosing not to rather than she physically couldn't.
mm.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
I think
and I
this is
think
not,
that you're right because that's how it's perceived, isn't it?
yeah.
Well, you won't talk to me. It's not you
Yeah.
can't talk to me. I think, and that is really shaming, isn't it?
I
Because
think, yeah,
that
I think
is,
there's different types of can't speak to me as well. I'm a systemic trained, so it's kind of what kind. My lovely tutor was always, what kind of, yeah, what kind of tired is this? What kind of can't find your voice is this? And so we can drill down even further, and we can kind of say, do you know what you want to say? But anxiety and fear is stealing your voice, so I can't get the words out. It's too scary. And so what happens is we've got when we're dysregulated, if you think this is your lower brain, your survival brain, your midbrain, and then your kind of prefrontal cortex, your thinking brain. So when we get dysregulated, you can't access this upper brain. You can't access the speech region, the Boca speech. I think it's called the Boca. I always pronounce it wrong. I'm pretty sure it's the Boca, the speech region. And so we literally can go into speechless terror,
yeah,
equivalent of stage fright. And so sometimes people know what they want to say and the words don't come out because
mm,
my body is shutting me down. I've learned a pattern to stay quiet, to stay safe. Yeah. And
yeah,
other times we don't have a language. We haven't got the thought process. We haven't got maybe we sometimes we've got access to a little bit of brain. And so we like, I know why I'm angry with you, but I can't say it because I fear the response and my body is shutting me down.
yeah,
And other times we don't know what's going on. We haven't got enough brain. We've just frozen completely. So there's different
mm,
types of not finding your voice. I'm gonna use a little bit of my stuff. Um, Many years ago, I was the one that because I grew up in a home that wasn't safe. I knew what I wanted to say, and I knew that I was, but the words would not come out. So I was stuck. But what I learned to do was actually, and it's not necessarily about the person who's standing in front of us. I think that's really important to say because you can have the kindest, most compassionate, gentle person in front of you who's not going to blow up on you. But
mm,
actually, your body isn't feeling that because it's so wired up from our histories. If you've grown up in a home where you've been literally terrified, your body doesn't know the difference. It's not updated that this person is safe. That I
yeah.
can, I can be emotion, I can be honest with you, and you'll tolerate that. Yeah, this is where I think we have to work with couples around consistency. So it's not okay to do it once. We have to work really hard to be consistent with our listening, consistent with our so we build that safety that bodies can settle down and know that you're a trusted person, you're my safe person. I can
Mm,
speak to you. So what I used to do is I used to write letters I used to,
Oh,
like,
right,
if I was
yeah.
angry or upset, I'd get a pen and paper and I would scribble letters and I would shove them under the door and run. Yeah. Why was I? Because actually, it's too scary to tell you because all I know from history is that it's not okay to find your voice. It's not okay to speak up
Yeah,
here. You just go be quiet and shrink and hide because it's not safe.
yeah.
And so, yeah, I'd write the letters, push them under the door, and run. And then my partner's able to read them and then come and find me and say, "It's okay, we can talk about this." Yeah. So
Yeah,
I often
sometimes it
give.
is. I agree. I think sometimes it is. It's safer to write it rather than.
I
I
like
mean, I think,
writing.
yeah, I think sometimes you can have that conversation as long as it's not a row, because I think the written word can be misconstrued, as we know.
It's
Um,
it can slow everything down and give
yeah,
people time to process, to think about it. How do I want to respond? It allows us to be a little bit more vulnerable and a bit braver. There
yeah,
is a flip side to this, as we know with keyboard warriors, is that you can be too brave and you can say stuff that you wouldn't say in person. So you can
yeah.
get
That's the
really
other side. Yeah,
attacky.
that's the
You
other
can get
side.
really angry and attacky because I feel more, there's more power. I can exert more power this way. And
Yeah,
so we have to be really careful that when we're with text messages and emails and stuff, that when we're triggered into that fight, flight, survival, when we flip our lid, send it and we haven't calmed down.
yeah.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
that can happen verbally as well, can't it? Because it just depends who
It
you get.
can, and that I think it really depends on how we're wired up, whether we're wired up to snapshot or whether we blow up. And actually, it really depends on how stressed we are as to we may do a bit
Mm.
of both. Yeah,
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 because I think sometimes it is, well, I'm hurting and I'm going to hurt you back. And then it becomes that battle of who can hurt the other one the most, and those personal comments that come out.
yeah.
And I think that's the other thing, the danger
They're
that
coming
people
from our lower brain. I don't think
yeah,
we, and I'm probably quite generous with my assumptions because, with the trauma world, I don't think we intentionally are wanting to hurt the other person. I think pain is a little bit like a hot potato. I can't handle this. It's too hot, and I've got no
yeah,
oven gloves, and I toss it at you. I give it you back to hold, and so what happens is I'm trying to get you to feel how I feel.
yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely. But the problem is that when the couples are doing that, they don't recognize that.
yeah.
And they only hear those personal words that have been flung at
You
them.
can't unsay it, can
No,
you?
you can't. And I
You
think
can't
that's a lot
unsay it.
because they're stuck with those unkind words that were thrust at them.
Yeah,
And therefore, that is where they get stuck quite often, I
yeah,
think.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
So, what about those couples that don't fight? They'll go away. We never have crossword, or they'll just there'll be a disagreement, but um, they'll just go away and then they'll come back and assume that it's all okay because we get
I
those.
think this is how relationships end, isn't it? In the long term, I call it editing or discounting. And I'm aware of this. We can be, there's a need for me to be kind and compassionate. So we can be over generous with our kind of assumptions of people's motives. And so we can make excuses for them and we can kind of let them off the hook and not hold them accountable or for their behavior or what they did. And so what happens is, I think we're really delving into the land of people pleasers, the dis-ease to please, which we're often taught, through our childhoods. So I need to be able to disappoint you. I need to be able to let you down. I need to be able to say what I need and want. And if I can't do that, then I don't have it goes back to that not having a voice. And so you end up with a pressure cooker. You end up with two people who aren't happy about stuff. They haven't talked about it. They can't talk about it. They shoved it all under the carpet. And then this happens. You start here, you end up here, and you're moving further and further apart. You're emotionally disconnected. You don't feel listened to or heard. You don't feel I matter. Intimacy disappears because we know that anger is not an aphrodisiac. It's an invisible wall that goes up between
Mm.
couples. And so this is where I know we're going to cover this a bit later on. This is where I think When I don't feel that I can be heard or listened to, then you don't care. The stories we make up, you don't care. You're
Mm.
not interested. That, come on, where are you? The resentment starts to creep in,
Oh,
and
doesn't it just?
I'm not liking you very much. So I might be acting out or shutting down, withdrawing or attacking. And so this resentment happens in relationships. And I think it's the resentment that then leads to entitlement that actually I start to, it's called the confirmation bias. So I start to justify my own behavior
Yeah,
based on that you're a bit of you're a bit of a crappy person. So it's okay for me to treat you that way. So,
yeah,
and when you do something, the confirmation bias is when you do something wrong, you're a nasty person. Yeah. When
yeah,
I do something wrong, it's because of you. It's because of how
yeah,
you are. You don't, that you don't deserve it. Yeah.
yeah,
So that
yeah.
resentment creeps in. And the really sad thing is, and how relations often end is you've either got two people who have got resentment going on, or you might have just one person who is kind of like doesn't think there's anything too wrong here, but the other person is stacking it up, and then suddenly they're gone. Yeah,
Yeah, that's another one I really do experience about is all of a sudden after numerous years together, one says, I'm not happy, and the other
mm,
one has no idea.
yeah.
And
Yeah,
it
and they're robbed of the opportunity sometimes to put it right. This is where affairs happen as well, I think. That resentment that leads to entitlement. Maybe if I don't feel I have a voice here, I don't feel I have any control. If there's nothing that's mine here, then I go, maybe the ultimate act of control is to take what I want somewhere else. Yeah.
yeah,
If
I
this
think
is
there is
dead,
that.
I liven it up. And a lazy therapist will say, oh, there's something missing within the couple. A clever and I think a curious therapist will say, what is it that's missing in you that you went looking for? Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And I would say there's also, I agree there's that where they'll go off, but I think when they don't speak up and they've put up with this, I can't speak, I can't tell you I'm unhappy because they're so worried about the other person and upsetting them.
Yeah.
So they're not putting their feelings and their thoughts foremost. They're just going, I can't say anything because I think you're too fragile to be able to hear this.
Yeah. It's a
And
pattern that's often learned in childhood, that I need to look after you, that I don't trust you to look after yourself. I
yeah,
see it a lot in the genders with men, men who think I need to look after this, that I need to look after my girlfriend, my wife. We're talking about heterosexual couples here, but I know there are lots of different variations of
mm,
couples. And so actually, if I need to look after you, and if the looking after becomes too much, what happens is the desire disappears.
yeah,
You're now somebody I need to take care of. Almost adult child dynamic
yeah.
appears, and actually, it's not very sexy. And
No,
so,
not at
actually,
all.
if I have to look after you too much, yeah, then I don't. I don't. The sparks are gone. The
Yeah,
intimacy
because I you're
disappears.
going to be that parent carer
Yeah,
or a brother or sister, and
yeah.
who's gonna feel desire for those
Exactly. And
others?
I think when we're looking at and the other way around exists. I always say, and when couples aren't kind of working together very well, the mother not lover comes in. If I'm having to, what people don't, people go on. There's lots of arguments that people have, and they always not, if someone's messy or not picking up their socks or whatever. And I know these are stereotypes, but they exist. Yeah,
Mm,
then actually I don't feel like your lover. I feel
yeah,
like your mother and I'm picking up after you. Yeah.
yeah,
And therefore we're not, the intimacy will disappear because the dynamic has changed. I think there's something about aspects of ourselves. So as we, when we experience a different aspect of our partners, it can be quite sexy. Yeah.
mm,
Um, I remember witnessing one of my partners. It was a really sad thing. It was actually at a funeral, yeah. And my partner at the time was quite quiet, yeah, and didn't say a lot. He was, yeah, quite quiet, quite a gentle person. And then we were at a funeral, and he had his suit on, and he got up and he made this speech. and he looked really powerful in this moment. And I was like, actually, there's a different aspect of you right here and right now that I quite like.
Yeah.
Um, another partner had a beard. He changed his facial hair, and I was like, "Oh, hello, Mr. Clean Cut's got a beard." And so this that we can it's we experience these different aspects of ourselves that keep that intimacy there.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
if the dynamic is a bit stale, if there's no room for that kind of erotic connection, if the relationship has kind of started to die. And actually, do you find that couples also use sex as the thermometer or the barometer?
Yeah, I think that sex can be used in all sorts of ways. I mean,
Yeah,
it can be used as a weapon almost. It can be, yeah, I mean, in all sorts of ways. I think not just withholding. I think there's always going to be a difference in
yeah,
sex drive, the level of sex drive, but the one who is has a lower sex drive is more likely to control the whole thing because, yeah, of course, they've got the power. Well, I feel like it, or I don't feel like it, or I want it, or I don't want.
mm,
Whereas the other one is left with a frustration.
yeah.
Um, but I think then there is that. Well, so that it can be used as a weapon. Well, if you can't be nice to me, then I'm not going to give you any sex.
Yeah,
There's
yeah.
that kind of thing goes on, or you only want me for my body, you only want me for sex. So I think it can be
The
used.
pressure from the other person who's wanting that intimacy and the other isn't. Yeah. I
Yeah.
also think we blame often couples, people blame themselves for when the other person doesn't desire them anymore. Like, is it
Absolutely.
because I'm too fat? Is it because I'm old or whatever? So it
Yeah.
becomes about us when actually it's probably more about your partner. The dynamics change. Maybe I'm not feeling it about myself. I think there are so many things that kill sex drive, aren't there? There's depression, shame, anxiety,
Yeah.
erectile dysfunction
Medicate.
is
Yeah.
is often rooted
Medication.
in anxiety.
Yeah,
Yeah,
and we've got medication in all of that as well.
yeah, absolutely.
Problems as well.
And so I
And
think
it can feel quite disempowering for a man when he can't gain an erection and how that
absolutely.
feels. So disempowerment, and then, as you say, the woman then, if it's a woman or even a male partner, they can then feel rejected and they're not wanting. There's something
What's wrong
wrong
with me?
there.
Yeah. We often use sex as a barometer of, how healthy the relationship is. And it's not necessarily how much, but the quality. And we don't necessarily talk about what kind of sex. And we're going to do a kind of
We are. We're
a
gonna have to
breakout of that about and look at it under the microscope a little bit more, aren't we? A bit later.
yeah, yeah,
But I think a lot of people don't understand how their bodies actually work. And so when we're kind of like, I don't have any sex drive, it's often because we're in survival mode. Yeah. And
yeah,
I use the cat and the mouse story. I love stories. I think as a play therapist, we're taught a toolkit of puppets, Sandra's storytelling. But children are wired for stories, but I think adults are too massively. And so when you've got a mouse that's running across the field and the cat's there, danger, fight, fright, freeze response. And actually, it's not a good idea here to get hungry. So our hunger drive can shut down in extreme stress. And actually, our sex drive, it's not a good idea to think, I fancy some sex right now. Because you'd be dead. So
yeah, absolutely.
those drives shut down when we're in a survival mode, just like a mobile phone won't open your
Mm,
apps with 1%. um when we're not okay, those drives, hunger, sex,
mm,
playfulness actually shuts down. We're not playful, we're not curious, we're not
mm.
innovative. There's too much anxiety and shame shutting us
Yeah,
down.
but I think that, as you say, that can create the arguments, that can create the distress, can't it?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. What's going on here? Yeah,
What about the power struggle? Mm.
yeah, Who's got the power and how? I think this is so big. It will definitely fit into another session that we can pull apart, because I'm thinking of there's so many different types of power, like who earns the money in a relationship. Yeah.
But
My
you know
needs
that,
are more
yeah,
important because I work. Your work, for a mom who maybe a stay-at-home mom, well, your work isn't valued. And so there can be power battles around money, power battles around who's pulling the most weight in this relationship.
yeah.
There can be power battles around values. Actually,
Mm,
I want a big house. Actually, I want more money to go on holidays.
yeah.
What we value can be very different.
Yeah. So those arguments can really be around power and disempowering or not
Yeah,
feeling power is powerless. And I think that that's another big one where
we're going to look at
arguments,
helplessness meets helplessness, aren't we? Yeah,
yeah. And I
later.
just bringing that into the fact of when we talk about the arguments, because how we fight or don't fight, I think it's a really important one to bear in mind,
Yeah.
isn't it? Yeah.
We don't think of ourselves as controlling, do we, as human beings? And I'd hate, the thought of, oh my God, I'm really controlling, as a human being. Nobody wants to think that. But actually, as I put myself under the land, I think, oh my God, yeah, I do need a lot of control. Um, and it's rooted in safety. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think
It's
that
interesting because before we start, I'm going to share what happened before we started recording. It was like there was an automatic assumption that I was recording, and then I was like, "Oh, aren't you recording?" And you're like, "No, you need the control." And I'm like, "Oh, okay." We have an argument about who's recording. Yeah,
yeah, that was quite funny. And yeah, it was who's the controller, who's got the
yeah.
controls, and yeah, it's quite
But that
interesting.
ability to share the control too, when you're self-aware enough that we can kind of start to unpick what's going on. I love Esther's work, that kind of splitting the kind of ambivalence, or the kind of I like the rule of three. I call it the rule of three. So when I choose to do something, am I doing it for you or am I doing it for me? And the rule of three is maybe I'm just doing it to take care of the relationship. Yeah. So actually, sometimes this is important to me, sometimes it's important to you. And actually, we can pick our battles. Yeah. We
Yeah,
don't
I
have to,
agree.
we can choose actually to let that go, because that's not so important. But this really is, and I'm going to fight about it. Or
Yeah,
I'm gonna I'm not gonna move on this one because it's a
yeah,
deal breaker. Yeah.
and I think that's where it's come to mind. You talking about that is um, that we're not always going to agree.
No,
We
we
can't
can't.
because we are so very different,
Yeah.
and I think it is the respect.
Yeah.
Respect for each other and acknowledgement that each of us has an opinion and we're allowed it. It
Yeah.
doesn't mean we have to agree on everything. And if you don't agree with me, then you don't love me or you don't care about me. It is you have an opinion and you are an individual and you're entitled to that opinion. I respect that. I don't not going to agree with you, but I do accept that you've got the right to think differently.
You're absolutely right. We can get so caught up in the need to be right and the need for control and have things our way, rooted in anxiety often and perfectionism.
Yeah.
I'm thinking about the couple in the kitchen. She's like, I don't cook dinner, and I was like, why not? And she was like, because I just get criticized all the time. I'm not doing it right, and so it's too triggering because he likes the carrots cut this way and I cut them this way. And so that ability for us to kind of go, we can respect your way of doing it and shut up and let you cut the carrots long ways and I can cut them into circles. And actually, both of us could be right here. When you're doing dinner, you cut the carrots this way. And when I'm doing dinner, I'll cut the carrots this way. And it might seem small, but it's the small little power fights that escalate over time because somebody's like, and I think what ends relationships that I can't do anything right.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah.
And I
Whatever I
think,
do, I can't do anything right.
yeah, can't do anything right. But there is also that other one where we've got to think exactly the same, otherwise we're not suited.
It's interesting, isn't it? I was listening to a podcast of Esther's a long time ago. Well, actually, it wasn't that long ago, a few months ago. And she was saying that we expect other people to think the same as us, and we expect them to have the same reference as us, and they can't have the same point of view and the same point of reference as us because they're not us. And
Yeah.
so that's the mistake we get into. Why don't you think like I do? Why don't you do it like I do?
Yeah. And there
Um,
is a sheer astonishment, isn't I am sure you
yeah,
see it. I've seen it hundreds of times. Or why don't you see it my way? Why don't you think the
yeah,
same way? And there is that, well, surely there is another. And I guess the thing with that is that we've come from a different background, we've come from different way of being. So our way is the only way that we've learned. We've only recognized that growing
exactly.
up from our family of origin, and therefore that for somebody else to cut the carrots a different way, for example,
Yeah.
is really what, who would cut carrots that way? Because
Yeah, like the apple, the meringue pie hot. No, we have it cold in our house. These cultural, this is a nice a place to bring in culture. We have different cultures in different homes. We have
yeah,
different, kind of. We might have an Italian, we may have a Asian family, and so there will be the different lenses that we can put on to have a look at what's going on here. And I'm thinking about, the getting it right or wrong is often linked in our cultural homes of origin. So actually, I remember working with, thinking of those couples, like the Asian family has a big sense of shame and secrecy around their culture that is kind of like we don't really talk about stuff outside of the family. We keep it inside. And then the Italian kind of member of the family who have come together. Well, actually, we have a really big sense of family, and so do the Asian family, but in a very different way. And so they're not so shame based. And so actually, he talks to the family about stuff that's going on, and she feels really betrayed because you've gone outside of our, you've shared
oh,
our stuff, you've breached a boundary, and he's no idea he's breached a boundary. He's like, and who's right or wrong here? Actually, they get into a clash, but actually both of them are right. And actually it's the ability to actually make sense of what how are we coming at this. I love the question, why is it important? Why is it important? Why does it matter to you? So we can start to get curious rather than just like,
oh,
that's silly, or we invalidate people. We're going to do one on pitfalls, aren't we, about, the ways we miss each other, because there's quite a
yeah,
lot of them. So we're gonna pull that apart in another session. But actually, yeah, that kind of I'm right, you're right. It just creates. I had a really nice juicy bit in my head, and it's gone. I've lost it, but I know it will come back.
it will
It's kind
come
of
back.
like
It
it
will always.
sparked a little. Oh, that leads nicely into this, and then it's gone. But it will come back. It happens, doesn't it, when you're
Yeah,
working? So yeah, that kind of the need to be right. Splitting the ambivalence. There was another bit about. Oh, I know. When we're criticized too much, and we have that lens of you never do this right, we attack. One of the pitfalls of communication styles is you never. Yeah. So we attack.
analyzing.
You
Yeah,
talk about the drama triangle a lot, which it's not something I use a lot, but you like the drama triangle, don't you? And so actually, I'm much more I'm play based, so I'm like mine's more like chucking stones. If when
yeah,
you chuck your stone, I chuck one back, and so
yeah,
actually we end up throwing stones at one another if we're not
yeah,
careful. And so
yeah,
actually, one of the ways we can stop doing that is to get more, I love, one of my superpowers is must as a systemic therapist is curiosity.
yeah.
Yeah. Interesting. I think I've
I think
always
that's
been
for anyway, isn't it? Instead of
yeah,
just reacting, is be curious, and also be our own detectives. We can be
yeah,
our own detectives about what's going on for us. But for the other person, instead of biting or making an assumption and saying, I know what you're thinking, I know where that's going
yeah,
because
the
it's
mind
our,
reading, yeah,
yeah.
jumping to
But
conclusions.
yeah, but
Yeah,
instead of that, be curious. I'll stop and say, I wonder why. I wonder what has
yeah.
happened to you.
We
Or
it's in
I'm
yeah,
curious about that. And that is so much more powerful and so much useful rather than I know what you were going to say or what you're
we
going to
think we
do.
know what's going
Yeah,
on, but actually
you
sometimes
can't read
we
somebody else's
don't.
mind. And I
Yeah,
think
we
that's
don't know what's going on. Um,
no.
I think we're going to look at this one again a bit later, but the great expectations, it's kind of like, I'm going out and I expect you to wash up, but I'm not going to tell you. And then when I come
Oh,
back, I will persecute you because you didn't wash up. I've set you up to fail. I just know you won't do it. And
yeah,
these are
that's
often
it.
rooted in trust issues. I love Brené Brown's braving kind of framework. And so when somebody keeps saying something and they don't do it, it's not a behavioral issue, it's a trust issue. It's actually your words aren't matching your actions. So when I'm working with couples, I'm like, this is a relational issue. This is a trust issue. I keep saying I'm going to do something and I don't do it, so I've stopped believing it. Yeah,
Yeah, so then
yeah.
again, it's the fighting but not fighting, isn't it? It
Yeah.
is. But
Yeah. So the reliability, there's a reliability issue here, an accountability issue. And actually this person doesn't think it's important. And we can say sometimes when you change the communication to say this is important because I don't feel valued, I don't feel I matter. Um, when I ask you kindly to join me or do something, then you're not good and you don't do it. But then the defense is often, well, I don't do it well enough, so I've stopped trying because it's never good enough. So we get stuck in that kind of cycle of I'm not going to try, and
yeah.
actually I'm expecting, and so we get really really stuck in that.
Oh, there's a classic one that comes back to my mind. It was when I was my first husband. Oh, we were painting. I mean, and he told me that I wasn't doing it properly,
Mm.
and I went, I'm never going to paint again, and I didn't.
There, the
I
shame and
can't.
the
Yeah, I was
crushingness of that.
shamed. You have it instead.
Yeah,
You're not doing it properly. Instead of being shown, it was the criticism.
yeah,
And I think this is will create so many issues, won't it? Because when I back off, it's well, you didn't clean the bathroom properly, you didn't clear up the kitchen properly.
yeah.
And sometimes I think it's a case of, well, okay, let me show you how. Let's do it together, and this is how I think it will be a good way of doing it.
I think yeah, absolutely right.
Or otherwise, if you're cleaning the bathroom and I'm not happy with the result, then either just let it be or do it yourself later, but don't shame the other person.
Exactly. We can kind of thank the person for what they've done and add to it. I again, there's a lovely sign. I think it might be Esther's. I can't remember where I stole this one from, but behind every criticism is an unexpressed wish.
Yeah,
And if we go for the wish instead, if we change the communication to what we actually want, a healthy communication is to ask for what we want. You never come home on time can turn into, I would really appreciate it and care for if you could make the effort to come home on time when I'm cooking. Yeah,
absolutely.
yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I'm thinking of she'll shoot me down in flames. I think I'm living with somebody new at the moment, and I'm like, can you empty the bin? And I'm having to really hold my anxiety and give her time to do it. And then actually, when she's done it, I'm like, okay, stage one of emptying the bin is emptying, taking the bin bag out and put it in the dustbin. And I'm like, actually, I'm going to need to teach her stage two, which is actually clean the bin out, put another bin bag in. Yeah.
But
So
you
it's
didn't actually ask for that bit, did you? Can you empty the bin?
can you empty the bin? Well, that emptying the bin means something very different from her to me. I've emptied the bin, but
Yeah.
I haven't put a new bin bag in ready to refill it. So actually, yeah, I'm kind of like, actually, thank you for emptying the bin. The bin bags are here. So you
Yeah,
can,
that's
yeah,
it. And I think that's it.
yeah.
That's where the miscommunication comes in. Missing bits and arguments start from that, don't they? But I
This is
told
one,
you, oh,
yeah,
this is what I wanted. But
yeah.
actually the rest of it was in our heads.
I
And
think
mm,
how we talk to people, whether we talk to them with kindness, whether we have respectful conversations that are not shaming and attacking. And this is something I work with a lot with the families and children. Is
mm.
the way you ask somebody makes such a massive difference. Nobody really likes being told what to do. We
No.
talked
Do
about this
you?
previously.
Yeah, and
Yeah,
the number of times I say to people, uh, you know, would you say that to your best friend, or would you say it that way to
yeah,
your best friend? And they will go, no. And I think, well, Is
Yeah,
that okay to say it to your nearest and dearest, the most important person in your life?
exactly. Are you being respectful? Are you being kind? Um, would you mind, or can you join me? Or I'd really appreciate. They are all better ways to ask for what you need. If the relationship is good, we are more likely want to do things for other people than if we're sitting with a load of anger, resentment, the way you talk about me, the way you treat me. I remember somebody. I remember somebody, and this is I know you're big on the acts of love, aren't you? The four acts of love, and me too. But I've heard you mention it quite a few times. And so actually, sometimes what you said about not being the best detectives, we're looking for the evidence sometimes that you don't care rather than all the evidence that is stacked up there, but it might be in a different language. So maybe I don't get flowers, but maybe he's there every time it's raining to pick me up from the train station. So the different acts of love that show us that somebody cares. And so I think just like couples don't talk about sex, they don't talk about what you do that helps me feel cared for.
Yeah. And
Yeah,
that is Gary Chapman's five love languages.
yeah,
I think that is really useful to identify what our love language is and what our partners is.
yeah,
For a person, oh, it could be anybody. It could be a friend. It could be a child. It could be your a colleague. It could be anyone. Just
yeah,
understanding how they function, what makes them tick, and what they appreciate, and what
yeah,
hit. I remember one couple where she was complaining bitterly that he never told her that he loved her. You never give me expressions of it. He said, but I go to work every day. I earn money. I look after the children while you're still at work, and I
mm,
cook the meals so that you don't have to worry when you come home from work.
mm,
She just sat because she just speechless because that had never occurred to her,
yeah.
that that was his way of giving and showing love.
It kind of it reminds me of a passage in a book by Terence Real. I think it's like the one I don't want to talk about it. I went to New York to have a look at the paradox of masculinity. And actually what happens when somebody's not massively emotionally available is that actually you can give me money, you can give me gifts, you can earn all this money, but I want you.
Yeah.
I don't feel your presence. There's no, that emotional connection is missing. How do we get that to that emotional connection? I know we're going to do one when words aren't enough and bodies. I always remember, sometimes couples, the words get in the way. They
Well,
have the wrong words,
yeah,
and the words are, you know, maybe the apology is not great. Maybe I don't know what I've done, and so I'm not apologizing. We need to do one on apologies for sure. I'm going to put it on the list. Can I write it down right now? Because I think it's such a big topic. Apologies and a good apologies and apologies that are just really naff and just make things worse. I've put apologies on the list. So yeah, when we're emotionally disconnected from somebody, this is kind of like, come on, where are you? And for some people, they don't
mm,
have that emotional availability because of their trauma and histories. And so yeah, it's really sad passage. I think she you gave me Gucci handbags, you gave me a flash car. But actually, I still left you anyway because I couldn't have you. You weren't here.
yeah. But
Yeah.
I think that's because it's not expressed, it's not talked about, it's not explored, it's not, the detective
Yeah.
work hasn't been done. And I think,
It's interesting. Sometimes when I work with couples, I ask them to look at each other, and you can see the defending. You can see the defending right
oh,
away because they can't look into the intimacy to look into each other's eyes to stay
yeah,
in that connection. They're like they get giggly to defend. They look away. So a lot of people have so much shame in their makeup, and they're so guarded and defending that I can't actually tolerate that eye contact, that kind of intensity that actually creates passion. Yeah.
mm, mm.
Yeah. Yeah.
Wow. I think it's time to finish
Is
because we've
it?
got so much.
We got through I think we did really well because I'm like Miss Chaos. I'm like I go anywhere and everywhere. So yeah, we've really managed to kind of name some of the topics we're going to pull under the microscope. And I think it's really worked well because you're quite structured and I'm not so structured. And so actually working with you has stopped me kind of like, I'd like be off to the 10 reasons the 10 things we do to not listen. And I'd
So
be like,
isn't that just it? That we are so
yeah,
different,
we are opposites to some degrees.
and yet
Yeah.
it works. And that,
But it's a,
those,
it's always fun, isn't it? I love talking sharp. I could do it, well, we do, don't we? Way into the night, but we're actually in the daytime today. Yeah.
yeah. So I'm going to end now, and let's end it, and let's say, we
What's
are
coming up next before we go? Should we let them know what's coming up
okay.
next?
Come on then,
This
you're the
control
controller.
freak's just kicking in with a little, let's squeeze a little bit more in. What are we going to do next? We are actually going to look at all the pitfalls in communicating, the things to look out for, and then the things that we can do that make it different. Yeah. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Okay. So bye, everybody.
Thanks for listening.